The air of Ayutthaya, jewel of Siam, struck Annan like a physical blow. A humid tapestry woven from the scents of frangipani and river mud, the distant chime of temple gongs, and the ceaseless chatter of 1,000 voices. He, a solitary figure with eyes the colour of dark amber, carried little more than a well-used longbow, a satchel of herbs, and the ghost of a village turned to ash. Above his right temple, a faint crescent-shaped scar, a memento from a jungle viper, was usually hidden by his dark, unruly hair. It throbbed faintly now, as it often did when the past pressed too close. An elder's voice from a time before the smoke and screams echoed in his memory. A mind that sees the unseen truth, Annan, destined to mend the broken loom of justice when shadows fall upon the Golden City. He'd dismissed it as folklore then, a child's fancy. Now, seeking only anonymity, the words felt like a quiet accusation. He found work on the klongs, the canals that were Ayutthaya's lifeblood, his lean, wiry strength suited to hauling rice barges. His gaze, honed by years of solitary survival, missed little. The casual arrogance of richly clad officials, the fear in the eyes of a vendor short-changed by a uniformed guard bearing the insignia of Phra Krai, a name already whispered with a mixture of respect and trepidation. One sweltering afternoon, drawn by the rhythmic clang of a hammer, he wandered into the artisan quarter. There, amidst the scent of heated metal and beeswax, he saw Kundecha, a master goldsmith whose skill was renowned throughout the kingdom. The man's face, etched with concentration, was a study in integrity as he worked on an intricate piece. Assisting him was his daughter, Mali. Her movements were deft, her quiet grace a small, steady light in the bustling workshop. Their eyes met briefly when Annan retrieved a dropped chisel for her. She offered him a hesitant smile and a dipper of cool water. It was a fleeting moment, a spark of simple human connection in Annan's guarded world. Days later, that fragile piece shattered. A harsh clamour erupted from Kundecha's workshop. Phra Krai's guards, led by a captain whose face was a mask of cold authority, dragged the bewildered goldsmith into the street. Before the horrified eyes of his neighbours and a growing crowd, Kundecha was accused of high treason, substituting base metals for pure gold in a sacred coronet, a vital piece of regalia commissioned by King Narai himself for an upcoming ceremony. A crudely altered section of a golden band was thrust forward as proof. A lie. I would never. Kundecha's voice, hoarse with shock, was drowned out by the captain's pronouncements. Mali's anguished cries tore through the air as her father, his dignity stripped away, was bound and led away like a common criminal. Annan watched, rooted to the spot. The blatant injustice, Mali's raw, uncomprehending grief, it resonated with the hollow ache of his own losses. The elder's prophecy, the broken loom of justice, slammed into his consciousness with the force of a physical blow. He could not, he realized with a sinking heart, simply walk away. The image of Mali's despair haunted Annan's sleep. By the first sliver of dawn, he was moving. The desire for anonymity warred with a resurgent, almost forgotten sense of duty. He found Kundecha's workshop sealed, a grim-faced guard posted outside. Using skills learned in the deep jungle where silence and shadow were allies, Annan found an unsecured window at the rear. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of extinguished forges and shattered lives. His observant eyes scanned the room. Kundecha's meticulous tools were laid out for fine, delicate work, not the crude butchery evidenced by the proof. In a dusty corner, almost hidden beneath a workbench, Annan's fingers closed around a tiny, gleaming sliver of pure high-carat gold, utterly inconsistent with the accusation of using base metals. Troubled, Annan sought out Luangpu Somchai, an elderly monk residing in a simple forest on Ayutthaya's outskirts. The monk's wisdom was spoken of in reverent whispers. Luangpu Somchai, his face a landscape of serene wrinkles, greeted Annan as if expecting him. His gaze lingered on the faint scar above Annan's temple. The path to truth is often obscured, young seeker, the monk said, his voice gentle. He offered no easy answers, only parables. The brightest gold can be hidden by a thin layer of dust, Annan. Only a patient eye, still heart, can discern its true worth. As Annan prepared to leave, the monk pressed a smooth, cool river stone into his palm. Hold this when your path is clouded. It has felt the river's truth for 1,000 years. Annan found Mali near the city magistrate's office, her face pale with exhaustion and unshed tears. Her attempts to petition officials had been met with indifference or veiled demands for bribes she couldn't pay. He approached her cautiously, showing her the gold sliver, sharing his observations about the workshop. Hope, fragile and hesitant, flickered in her eyes. She saw not a vagrant, but a man with an unnerving stillness and a gaze that seemed to pierce through deception. "My father," she whispered, her voice trembling, "he spoke to me of concerns. The gold supplied through Fracry's office for the coronet. Some of it felt wrong, lighter than it should be. He kept meticulous private notes, always." A pact, unspoken yet binding, formed between them. Malay remembered Boone, a junior scribe in Fracry's vast household, a timid young man who had once shown her father a small kindness. Annan, blending into the city's teeming crowds, found Boone near the sprawling government complex. Terrified of Fracry's reach, Boone was initially resistant, but Annan's quiet persistence, his appeal to the scribe's conscience, eventually wore him down. Days later, a trembling Boone covertly passed Annan a fragment of a discarded document, an internal requisition order signed by Fracry's chief steward for an unusually large quantity of refined gold, dated after the gold was supposedly delivered to Kundecha for the coronet. It was a small crack in Fracry's facade. Annan began to watch Fracry's lavish, heavily guarded villa from a distance, noting the patterns of deliveries, the frequent comings and goings of foreign merchants, Dutch, Persian, their faces etched with the shrewdness of those who dealt in high-stakes trade. He learned that Fracry hosted opulent private parties, his wealth clearly exceeding his official income. The whispers Annan had heard about Fracry's influence were solidifying into a grim picture of corruption. The net tightened. One evening, as Annan navigated a dimly lit market alley near the river, 3 figures detached themselves from the shadows. "Fracry sends his regards," one sneered, drawing a wicked-looking kriss. Annan reacted instantly. Years of jungle survival had honed his reflexes. He dodged the first lunge, his longbow a blur as he nocked an arrow, not to kill, but to disable. The arrow thudded into the lead attacker's thigh. Before the others could react, Annan flung a small pouch of finely ground chili and forest irritants he always carried into their faces. Coughing and blinded, they stumbled, giving Annan the precious seconds he needed to melt back into the labyrinthine warren of Ayuthaia's night. He was shaken, but resolute. Fracry knew he was a threat. "We need more," Annan told Mali, his voice grim, as he tended to a shallow cut on his arm. "We need your father's notes, and something from Fracry's own hand." Mali, her fear warring with a growing determination, recalled a hidden compartment beneath a floorboard in her father's workshop, where he kept his most precious designs and personal ledgers. "He showed it to me once, as a child," she said, a flicker of a smile touching her lips. "He called it his heart book." Their plan was audacious, fraught with peril. The upcoming festival of Loy Krathong, when the city would be alive with lights, music, and throngs of people releasing their krathongs onto the river, would provide the necessary cover. Mali, feigning a desire to retrieve personal mementos of religious significance for the festival, would attempt to gain access to her father's workshop. Annan, meanwhile, would target Fracry's private study. Fracry was known to attend a lengthy, formal reception at the royal palace on the festival night. Luangpu Somchai, when they sought his counsel one last time, listened patiently. He then picked up a fallen bothy leaf, tracing its intricate veins. "Sometimes," he murmured, "the fiercest dragon guards the smallest, most vital key to its own undoing, and sometimes the river itself carries truth to those who know how to listen." During their clandestine meetings, amidst the constant threat, their bond deepened. Annan found himself speaking of his lost village, the faces of his family blurred by time, but the ache still sharp. Malay, in turn, shared stories of her father's unwavering dedication to his craft, his dreams for her future. He saw in her not just grief, but a resilient strength, a quiet courage that mirrored the steady flame of a temple candle. He gave her the smooth river stone Luangpu Somchai had given him. "For courage, Malay," he said, his voice softer than he intended. Her fingers closed around it, her eyes meeting his with an unspoken understanding that transcended words. The night of Loy Krathong arrived, transforming Ayutthaya into a city of shimmering light and festive chaos. Thousands of krathongs, small lotus-shaped floats bearing candles, incense and flowers, drifted on the dark waters of the Chao Phraya River and its myriad klongs, carrying away misfortunes and prayers for good luck. Mali, her face composed despite the tremor in her hands, approached the magistrate's office. A new, younger guard was on duty. Playing her role of a grieving daughter seeking to make merit for her imprisoned father, she offered him a small pouch of coins, nearly all she had left. Moved by her plea, or perhaps the weight of the silver, he grudgingly allowed her a brief, supervised entry into Kundecha's workshop. While the guard watched impatiently from the doorway, Mali moved with desperate swiftness to the loose floorboard. Her fingers fumbled, then found the catch. Inside lay her father's heart book, a meticulously kept ledger detailing every gram of gold received, its purity, its use, and crucially, a precise accounting of the shortfall from Phra Krai's supplied batch for the royal coronet, along with Kundecha's private notes of his ignored concerns. Simultaneously, under the cover of the festival's joyous din, Anand scaled the high outer wall of Phra Krai's opulent villa. The air within the compound was heavy with the scent of expensive perfumes and blooming night jasmine, a stark contrast to the city's festive odours. He moved like a phantom through the darkened corridors, his senses hyper-alert, every shadow a potential threat. He knew Phra Krai was at the royal palace, but the villa was still well patrolled. Reaching the nobleman's private study, a room filled with rare artifacts and scrolls, Anand began his search. His fingers traced the edges of heavy teak chests, tapped on lacquered panels. Time was a relentless enemy. Then his knuckles rapped against a section of a large bookshelf that sounded hollow. He pressed, and a section slid silently inward, revealing a cleverly concealed strongbox. Inside, his breath caught. There were several ledgers bound in rich leather. One detailed Phra Krai's systematic extortion of local merchants. Another, more damning, recorded illicit transactions with foreign traders, Dutch VOC officials, Persian envoys, involving silks, spices, and, most significantly, unrefined gold ore. And beneath them, a small, heavy sack. Anand's heart pounded as he opened it. Inside gleamed raw gold ore, identical in its unique reddish tint to the high-quality ore Kundecha had described as being essential for the royal coronet. The very gold Phra Krai had accused the goldsmith of stealing. As Anand clutched the ledgers and the sack of ore, a floorboard creaked behind him. He spun around. Phra Krai stood in the doorway, his usually smooth face a mask of cold reptilian fury. Beside him loomed his hulking personal bodyguard, a mountain of a man with eyes like chips of obsidian. So, Phra Krai's voice was a silken threat. The persistent jungle rat has found its way into the lion's den after all. A pity your curiosity will be so short-lived. The bodyguard lunged. Anand, reacting on pure instinct, sidestepped, using a heavy ornate brazier to block the man's path. He knocked an arrow with lightning speed, his bow a natural extension of his arm. The arrow wasn't aimed to kill, but to disarm. It whizzed past Phra Krai's shoulder, pinning the bodyguard's sword arm, the sleeve of his rich silk tunic, to the heavy wooden doorframe. The man roared in pain and surprise. Phra Krai, momentarily startled, drew a jewel-encrusted kriss from his sash. Anand knew he couldn't fight them both. He had the evidence. Escape was paramount. He feinted towards Phra Krai, then, with a desperate surge of adrenaline, kicked over a tall cabinet laden with porcelain vases. As they crashed to the floor, creating a cacophony and a momentary diversion, Anand threw himself through the study's large latticed window, shattering the delicate woodwork and landing heavily in the manicured garden below. Alarm's bells began to shriek within the villa. Ignoring the searing pain in his shoulder where a shard of glass had sliced him, Anand scrambled to his feet, clutching the precious ledgers and the ore. He could hear shouts, the sound of running feet. He had to reach Mali. He stumbled through the darkened city, his wound bleeding freely, every shadow seeming to hold a new threat. Mali, her own heart a frantic drum, waited at their pre-arranged rendezvous point, a dilapidated spirit house near a quiet stretch of the river. She saw him stagger out of the darkness, his face pale, his shirt stained crimson. Relief warred with terror as she rushed to his side, her father's ledger clutched in her hand. "Anand! You're hurt!" He pressed Phra Krai's ledgers into her grasp. "We have it, Mali. We have the truth." News, carried on the fearful whispers of the city, reached them by morning. Kundetcha's sham trial was to conclude that very day. A guilty verdict was preordained, his execution to follow swiftly, a brutal message to anyone who might question Phra Krai's authority, a swift resolution to the scandal of the defiled coronet. They had only hours. Anan, weakened by blood loss and fever, knew he couldn't storm the royal palace. Despair threatened to engulf them. Then Mali, her fingers tracing the smooth riverstone Anan had given her, remembered Luangpu Somchai's words. Sometimes the smallest key. Her eyes widened. The royal scribe, Anan, Kun Pipit. He was my grandfather's dearest friend. He is old now, living in seclusion, but they say King Narai himself still consults him on matters of history and precedent. He is a man of unimpeachable integrity. It was their last desperate hope. Leaning heavily on Mali, Anan made the agonizing journey to Kun Pipit's modest dwelling, a tranquil oasis amidst the city's clamour. The elderly scribe, his face a roadmap of wisdom and gentle melancholy, listened intently as Mali, her voice trembling but clear, recounted their story. Anan, near collapse, presented Phra Krai's ledgers, Kundetcha's meticulous heart book, and the damning sack of gold ore. Kun Pipit examined the evidence with painstaking care, his keen old eyes missing nothing. The tapestry of deceit was undeniable. The scribe's face grew grave. "This corruption," he murmured, "it poisons the very heart of the kingdom. Phra Krai has betrayed the king's trust, and an innocent man's life hangs in the balance." He looked at Anan, then at Mali. "You have shown great courage, children." Without another word, he summoned his most trusted attendant, dispatching him with the evidence and his own urgent, personal attestation directly to the Maha Uparat, the king's chief minister and closest adviser, just as the first rays of dawn touched the golden spires of Attire. The chief minister, a man known for his astuteness and loyalty, acted swiftly. Bypassing Phra Krai's network of allies within the court, he presented the irrefutable proof to King Narai. The king, a ruler known for his deep piety and his commitment to justice, was incandescent with rage at the brazen deception, the threat to a sacred commission, and the peril to an innocent artisan. His decree was swift and absolute. Phra Krai was to be arrested immediately. Kundetcha's execution was halted. The city held its breath as royal guards, their expressions grim, stormed Phra Krai's villa. The nobleman, confident of his untouchability, was taken completely by surprise. His vast network of corruption began to unravel with astonishing speed. Kundetcha, moments from a cruel and unjust end, was freed, his name cleared, his honour restored. The king himself, in a public gesture, praised the goldsmith's skill and integrity, commissioning him to oversee the purification and cataloguing of the royal treasury's gold, a task of immense trust. Anan recovered slowly under Mali's devoted care in a small sunlit room provided by a grateful Kundetcha. Though offered a position of honour within the royal guard, Anan politely declined. The glare of public life held no appeal for him. He found contentment in assisting Kundetcha, his hands, once skilled only in the arts of survival, now